Hi, and welcome to this section of the tutor where we're going to continue our work on division and part 2 of division. And the only thing different between this and the last section is going to be the problems are going to get a little bit bigger and there's going to be a little more steps involved. But the basic idea is the same. You're taking a number and you're trying to divide a number into it and you're trying to see how many times can you do that, okay? So let's go ahead and get started by working some problems, and we're going to build up in complexity here. What if you have 47 divided by 2? Okay, 47 divided by 2. Well, the first thing you do is you rewrite this problem and you put 47 underneath the house and 2 on the outside. Okay, just like this. Now what you're doing is you're trying to divide 2 into 47. Okay? And the way you do this when you look at a problem is certainly, I don't know off the top of my head how many times 2 is going to go into 47. So I'm going to show you the method that you use to go ahead and do this. The first thing you do is you take your 2 and you see, forget about the fact that it's 47 under here, okay? Just look at the first number, okay? Can 2 go into 4? Just without even looking at the 7, can 2 go into 4? In other words, 2 times what would give you 4, okay? 2 times what would give you 4? I think that you all know the answer to that is 2, okay? 2 can go into 4 2 times, okay? So let's go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and see where that takes us. What we're going to do next is we're going to say 2 times 2, and we're going to multiply that, and we're going to get a 4 back, okay? We're going to get a 4 back, okay? And notice we haven't done anything with the 7 yet, so I'm just showing you the method here. The next thing you do is you subtract these two numbers, okay? 4 minus 4, okay? Well, that's going to give you 0, okay, like this. Okay, now you're basically done here. You can't take 2 and divide it into 0 because, you know, in order to do division, the number you're dividing into has to be bigger than this number. So you can't do any more division, okay? But you do have this 7 sitting out here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw an arrow, and I'm going to put this 7 down here, okay? So you have 7, okay? Now the thing you need to ask yourself is, how many times can 2 go into 7? In other words, 2 times what gives you 7, okay? 2 times 1 is 2, 2 times 2 is 4, 2 times 3 is 6, and 2 times 4 is 8. Well, that's too many. You can't do 2 times 4 because that'd be 8 and that'd be too many. You're looking for something close to 7. So 2 times 3 is going to give you 6. That's as close as you can get. So what you're going to do is you're going to put a 3 here over the next column, okay? And you're going to keep going. You're going to multiply. Every time you put a number up here, you've got to multiply, carry it down, subtract. So 3 times 2 is going to give you 6, okay? Again, you subtract. 7 minus 6 gives you 1, okay? And then the final thing you do is you say, can you divide 2 into 1? The answer is no, because this is too small. It's smaller than the number you're dividing by. And on top of that, there's no more digits to bring down here to help you out to make that number any bigger. So you say you have a remainder of 1, just like we had in the other problems. So the answer to this problem is going to be 23 remainder of 1. So what this means is that if you take 47 and you divide by 2, then that will go in 23 entire times, but then you'll have 1 ball left over, okay? You can't go an even number of times, okay? So I'm going to review that one more time. When you look at a random problem like this, you take and you see if you can divide the number into the first number. Answer was yes, so we put a 2, we got a 4, and we subtracted. Okay? We can't divide 2 into 0, so there's really nothing else we can do there. So at that point, you take the next number and you drag it down and you stick it down there. Okay? Now, I can divide 2 into 7. Okay, I can do that. 2 times 3 is 6, which is pretty close to 7, but not too much. So 2 times 3 gave us 6. You subtract again. Again, we cannot divide 2 into 1, and there's no more numbers to drag down, so you're done. You can't do any more. Basically, you keep doing this until you get a number that you can't divide into, and until you have no more digits to help you, and then that's your remainder. Okay? So you're doing all of this to find your remainder. Okay? It's not that hard, but it does take some practice. So let's go ahead and work some more problems. What if you had 55 divided by 3? Okay? So you have 55, and you're going to divide by 3. Same thing as before. First thing you're going to do is just see, can you divide by this first number? Okay, can you divide by that first number? Well, 3 times 1 gives you 3. 3 times 2 gives you 6, but that's too much because because I'm just looking at the 5. 6 is too big. It's bigger than 5. So I'm going to go ahead and put a 1 here because 3 times 1 gives me 3. So I'll put the 3 right below like this. Okay? And I subtract only these numbers here. 5 minus 3 gives me 2. Okay? 5 minus 3 gives me 2. So you have a subtraction sign there. Now, next thing you do. Can you divide 3 into 2? Well, the answer is no, because this is too small. But what you do have is you have an extra digit here, which we're going to drag down, and we're going to put down as 5. Now I have 25 down here. Can you divide 3 into 25? Okay? Can you divide 3 into 25? Well, let's think about it for a second. 3 times 5 is 15. 3 times 6 is 18. Okay? 3 times 7 is 21. And 3 times 8 is 24. That's as close as we're going to get, because if you go past that, you're going to be too many numbers, okay? So let's say 3 times 8 is going to give us 24, and that's as close as we're going to get. So we put an 8 up here on the next digit, and in order to find the remainder, we have to keep on multiplying and subtracting like this. So 8 times 3 is going to give you 24, okay? And you're going to do another subtraction. So in order to subtract this, 5 minus 4 just gives you 1. 2 minus 2 gives you 0, so you don't need to write that. Then the next thing you need to ask yourself is, can I divide 3 into 1? The answer is no, because this is too small. You have to have a number bigger than this number in order to divide. So you can't divide anymore, and you don't have any more digits to help you out to make the number any bigger, so you're done. So you just say, okay, the remainder is 1. So the total answer to this problem is 18 with a remainder of 1. Okay? 18 with a remainder of 1. Okay? Now, I also want to point out briefly that with every single one of these problems, you can check your answer. Okay? You can check your answer to every single one of them. Because what did we say before? What this number up here is telling you is kind of like 3 times what number is going to give you 55. Okay? That's kind of what we did. And we also have a remainder out here. So let's say we take 3 times 18 and see what happens. We're going to take 3 and multiply by 18. We're going to see what it comes out to. So let's do this. 8 times 3, remembering back from multiplication, is 24. So we've got to put a 4 up there, 4 down there, and the 2 up there for 24. And then 3 times 1 is 3, plus 2 more gives us 5, 54. Well, you may look at that and say, well, I got 54 here, and I'm trying to equal 55. But don't forget, you have this remainder. That means that 3 could go into 55 18 times, but there was 1 left over. Okay? So when you check the problem, you have to multiply this and you have to add the remainder back in because that was left over. And that gives you the 55, which agrees with what you had to begin with. So you know that you have the right answer. And you can do that with every single division problem. You can always check your answer. And so I think that you should do that. I think that for every problem you do, that you should check your answer and make sure that it's right. Okay, now let's say the next problem that you would have would be something like 87 divided by 6. Now, like with all of these problems, the first thing you're going to do is write your 87, which you're dividing into, underneath the house here, and you're going to write your 6 on the outside. That's what you're trying to divide in. Okay, so you're going to have that on the outside, and you're going to be dividing by 6 here. Okay, so the first thing you're going to do, I don't know what 6 times what would equal 87. Okay, 87 is a pretty big number. Okay, and I don't know off the top of my head what times 6 is going to equal 87. So we're going to use this. We're going to break this problem into pieces, and we're going to solve it like that. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to see how many times does 6 go into the 8, just the 8 by itself. And so you can kind of think about that. Well, 6 times 1 is 6, and 6 times 2 is 12. Well, 12 is too big because we're just looking at trying to divide into 8 right now. So you're going to have to go with 1, okay? So we're just going to put a 1 up here, and in order to go ahead and continue on with the problem, we're going to say 1 times 6 is going to give us 6, okay? And so we're going to put it down like that. And then the next thing you do is you just go ahead and subtract these two numbers. You don't worry about the 7 at this point. 8 minus 6 is going to give you 2, okay? 8 minus 6 is going to give you 2. And the next thing you do is you look at this number and say, can I divide 6 into 2? And the answer is no, because 2 is too small, okay? You're trying to divide 6 into 2, and you just can't do that because if you're going to divide into something, you have to be dividing into a number bigger than you are, okay? So you can't do that, but you do have the 7 sitting over here, and so what we're going to do is we're going to drag that 7 down, okay? And we're going to put it right here. And we're going to make it a 27. So when we did that initial subtraction, we couldn't go any further because this 2 is smaller than 6. So we just drag the 7 down and make it a 27. So then the next question is, for what number we're going to put up here? 6 times what is going to give us 27? We're going to try to divide 6 into 27. So you just go through your multiplication tables. Pick a starting point and just go from there. So I know that 6 times 4 is going to be 24, okay? And 6 times 5 would be 30. Well, 30 is too big because we're looking at trying to go up to 27. So I back off a little bit and I say 6 times 4 gives me 24. So that's as close as I'm going to get, okay? And I put the 4 up here, just like this, okay? 6 times 4, go ahead and multiply. 6 times 4 gives us, as we already said, 24. So I write it down like this. And again, I do another subtraction. In this column, the 7 minus the 4 is going to give me 3. Okay, and you can kind of think, starting at 7, 6, 5, 4, 3. Subtract 4, we got a 3 here. And 2 minus 2 is going to be 0, so I don't even have to write that out here, okay? So again, you go through the same thing. You've got a number down here. You say, can I divide 6 into 3? Answer is no, you can't, because 3 is smaller than 6, okay? There aren't any more digits to drag down here to help you out, so you're basically done. The remainder is going to be equal to 3. Okay? So the final answer to this problem is going to be 14 with a remainder of 3. Okay? 14 with the remainder of 3. And you know what this really means here is that you take 6 and you try to divide it into 87. It's not going to go an even number of times. It can go 14 times. Okay, you can do a group of 6, a group of 6, a group of 6, a group of 6, you know, into 87. And you can do that 14 times. But when you get to the last one, you're going to have 3 balls or pencils or whatever it is left over, and you're not going to be able to do anything with that. So it's just called a remainder, okay? Now again, I want to encourage you guys to always check your work, okay? Always check your work, because any division problem, you're always going to be able to see if you can have the right answer. So remember back in the beginning when I introduced division, what it is we're trying to do is we're trying to say 6 times whatever is up here is going to equal what's under here, and then don't forget we have a remainder. So let's go ahead and try to do that. Let's say 14 times 6. Let's multiply these two numbers together and see what we get. Well, 6 times 4 is going to be 24, so I'll put the 4 there and the 2 up in the other column. And then working on this column, 6 times 1 gives me 6, plus the 2 I just wrote down. 6 plus 2 gives me 8, so that's an 84. Now notice that it doesn't equal what's on the inside. Well, that's because we had a remainder, okay? That's because we had a remainder. Anytime you have a remainder, you're going to have to add that remainder back in, like this, and then in the end of the day, when you do that, you should get what you started with in the problem. And so what's what we have here? 84 plus 3 is 87. So what this means is that when you take the 6 and multiply by the 14, you get 84, okay? And you have to add those 3 extra balls back in that were left over, and then you'll get your 87. And that's how you check these kinds of problems with remainders. If your remainder is 0, which is a lot of the kind of problems we were doing in the beginning, then when you multiply these two numbers here, you should always get exactly what's in the center here in those cases. And those cases are the cases where you don't have any remainder, okay? So it's basically very, very easy to check your work here. You're just going to have to use your multiplication skills. Now again, we're going to go ahead and work through a lot of these problems because division is really one of the toughest areas a lot of people have problem with, and you're just going to have to work through some problems. 157 divided by 5. We go ahead and write 157 here, and we put a 5 out front, okay? Now, what you're really trying to do is you're trying to say 5 times what number is going to give you 157, and you may have a remainder to add in, but in the end of the day, you're trying to get 157. Now, I certainly don't know off the top of my head what that number is, so let's work through it. When you're confronted with something like this, the first thing you should do is say, well, let's go into the first digit. Can I take 5 and divide it into 1? Okay? The answer is no, you can't do that because division, remember, is taking something and breaking it up into groups of whatever this number is and going from there. So if I have one ball, okay, which is what I have here, if I'm looking at this digit, I can't make a group of 5 because I've only got one ball. So you really can't even do that. So you really can't work with this first digit here because it's less than this digit. So just go ahead and move on. Look at both digits together, which is 15. Can you take 5 and divide it into 15? Of course you can. Okay, 5 times 3 is 15. So you know you're off to a good start. So we tried to look at the first digit. We couldn't divide it because this is too small. It's smaller than the number you're dividing by. And we go ahead and expand our view and look at the two digits, and we say, sure, 5 times 3 is 15. So let's go ahead and work through it. 5 times 3 is 15. Okay? We subtract, we're going to get 0 here. Okay? Now the next thing you do, just like always, is you say, well, can I take 5 and divide it into 0? Of course you can't, because 0 is less than 5. You can't divide a bigger number into a smaller number. So you really can't do anything there, but you have this 7 here, which is always the next thing you should be looking at, and you go ahead and drag that 7 down here. Okay? So next thing you ask is, can I take 5 and divide it into 7? How many times will 5 go into 7? Well, 5 times 1 is 5. That's one time. And 5 is pretty close to 7. 5 times 2 is 10, but that's too much because that's greater than 7, so you can't do 5 times 2. So let's go backtrack a little bit, and we'll say 5 times 1 gives us 5. 5 times 1 gives us 5. Okay? And then we're going to go ahead and do our subtraction like we always do in these problems. 7 minus 5 you can do on your fingers, and you'll see that that gives you 2. Okay? And we go ahead and try again. 5, can we divide into 2? No, you can't because it's too small. It's less than 5. And there's no more digits here to drag down and help you out. So what this means is you're going to have a remainder of 2. Okay? So the final answer to this problem would be 31 with a remainder of 2. Okay? 31 with a remainder of 2. So that means when you take 5 divided into 157, it's going to go 31 times evenly, but then you're going to have two guys left over, and that's why it can't divide a whole number of times in there, because you're going to have 2 guys left over there. You're going to have a remainder. Okay? Okay, we're going to go ahead and work up in complexity here. 298 divided by 8. Okay? First, we're going to rewrite the problem, and we're going to say 298 underneath the house. We're going to divide 8 into that. Again, just like before, see if you can divide 8 into 2. Try the first digit. Answer is no. 2 is too small. You have to be dividing into a number bigger. So let's go ahead and expand our view. Let's look at 29. Can we divide 8 into 29? Well, sure you can, because 29 is bigger than 8. Let's see how many times we can do that. 8 times 1 is 8. That's pretty small. 8 times 2 is 16. We're getting closer, but we're not there. 8 times 3 is 24. We're getting real close to 29. 8 times 3 is 24. 8 times 4 is 32. Well, that's too big. You can't use that one. That was too big. We've already blown our limit. So let's go back and say 8 times 3 is going to give us 24. So we write that down, put a subtraction sign. And then we're going to go ahead and subtract and go from there. 9 minus 4 is going to give us, on your fingers, you can make sure you remember that that's 5, and 2 minus 2 gives you 0, so I'm not even going to write that. Next thing you do is you say, can you divide 8 into 5? You can't do that because 5 is less than 8. So we take and we drag this 8 down and make it 58. Now you say, can you divide 8 into 58? Well, sure you can. 58 is bigger than 8, so you can do that. Let's figure out if we can do that. Let's continue on. 8 times 4 gave us 32. 8 times 5 gave us 40. That's pretty much, that's a lot less than 58, okay? 8 times 5 is 40. 8 times 6 gives us 48. Getting closer. 8 times 7 gives us 56, and that's going to be as close as we're going to be able to get. 8 times 7. 8 times 7 is going to give us 56, okay? You do your subtraction. 8 minus 6 gives you 2. 5 minus 5 is just going to give you a big fat 0, so there's nothing else you can do there. You ask yourself, can you divide 8 into 2? No, you can't because 2 is too small. You've got to have a number bigger here than what you have up here. So you can't do any more division and you don't have any more digits to help you out. So this is going to mean you're going to have a remainder of 2. Okay? So the final answer to this problem is going to be 37 with the remainder of 2. With the remainder of 2. Now I'm going to leave it to you yourself here. You can pause the video and practice this here. But to check this, all you have to do is take 37 multiplied by 8. So you could take 37 multiplied by 8 and you'll get some number. Okay? And then you add your remainder back in to that number and you should get 298. Okay? So that would be how you would check these problems. All you have to do is multiply the answer that you got by what you were dividing by and add whatever remainder that you have, and then you should be able to check your answer. Moving on here, let's say you had 504 divided by 3. So you'll have 504 divided by 3. Okay? So, just like always, we see, can 3 go into 5? Well, sure it can. 5 is bigger than 3, right? How many times will 3 go into 5? Well, it's only going to go one time because 3 times 2 is going to give us 6, and that's too big. So let's say 3 times 1. 3 times 1 is going to give me 3. So I draw a line, and I do a subtraction. 5 minus 3 gives me 2. Okay? So now I ask myself the question, can 3 be divided into 2? Well, no, it can't because 2 is smaller than 3. You can't do that. So I'm going to drag this 0 down, and I'm going to make it bigger. And now I can do that. I can take 3 and divide it into 20. Okay, I can do that because 20 is bigger than 3. How many times will it go? 3 times, let's say 5 is 15. Okay, getting closer. 3 times 6 is 18. Okay, we're getting pretty close. And 3 times 7 is going to give you 21, and that's too big. You can't use that. So let's go back to 3 times 6. 3 times 6 giving us 18. Remember, we were trying to divide the 3 into the 20. We're going to say it goes 6 times evenly. Okay, 3 times 6 gives us 18. Let's go ahead and do this subtraction. Okay, you probably know that 20 minus 18 is just going to give you 2. Okay, but if you don't remember that, you can just do the subtraction here. Because you have a 0 up here, we're going to borrow from the 2, make him a 1. I'm going to put a 1 here and make him a 10. So I'm going to take the 1 from the 2 and give it to the 0, making him a 10. Now, 10 minus 8 is going to give you 2. And 1 minus 1 is going to give you 0, so you don't even have to add that in there. Okay? So now, continuing on, can 3 be divided into 2? No, it can't because 2 is too small. So I'm going to take this 4 and I'm going to bring it down here. I'm going to make it 24. Now I can do this division into 24. How many times will it go? Well, if you think about it, you'll realize that 8 times 3 is 24. So 8 times 3 is 24. So it goes an even number of times, and that would be 8 times. So 8 times 3 is going to give you 24. 24 minus 24 gives you a big fat 0. So that means that the remainder is 0. So there is no remainder in this problem. There is no remainder in this problem. So when you take 504 divided by 3, you're going to get 168. Okay, you're going to get 168. And it goes an even number of times with no remainder. And if you want to check your answer, which I think you should always do, then all you would have to do is say 3 times 168. Okay, and you should get 504. Let's multiply here. 8 times 3 is 24. So I'm going to put my 4 here and my 2 up here. Now let's multiply here. 6 times 3 is 18, right? 18. Plus the 2 I just wrote here is going to give me 20. So I'm going to put the 0 there and the 2 up there. Okay? 1 times 3 gives me 3. Plus 2 more give me 5. 504 checks with 504. So I have checked the answer. Remember, in the end of the day, when you do this, what you're trying to figure out is what number do you multiply by that would give you underneath what you're looking for here. Okay? Let's go ahead and continue working some challenging problems. Let's say you have 238 divided by 11. Okay? 238 divided by 11. And that's going to give you let's go ahead and rewrite it. 238 divided by 11. Now, the only difference between this problem and the last problem is here you have a double-digit number. But the process is exactly the same. There's no difference here. There's nothing a lot harder about it. You just have to use your multiplication knowledge, okay? How many times will 11 go into 2? It's not going to happen because 2 is too small. So let's go ahead and expand our search. How many times will 11 go into 23? Okay? Well, if you remember your times tables and you go back and you look at your 11 times tables, that's going to go in 2 times. Okay? And let's figure out the reason why. The reason why is because 11 times 2 gives you 22. And if you forget how to do that, just multiply 11 times 2. 2 times 1 gives you 2. 2 times 2, or 2 times 1 gives you 2. So 11 times 2 is 22. That's all I'm doing here. Okay, nothing special. Okay. Now, 22 is pretty darn close to 23, so that's exactly as far as we can go. So that's the right number, 11 times 2 here. So let's go ahead and do a subtraction. 3 times 2 is going to give you 1. Okay. 2 times 2 is going to give you 0, so you don't even have to write that here. So the next thing you do is you say, well, can 11 go into 1? Can 11 be divided into 1? Well, no, it can't because 1's too small. So let's drag this 8 down here and make it 18. Now, how many times will 11 go into 18? Well, I think you can convince yourself it's only going to go in 1 time because 11 times 1 is 11, right? And 11 times 2, we already said was 22, and that's too big because we're looking for 18. So we're going to say it goes in 1 time. Now, let's multiply. 1 times 11 gives you 11. Okay? So let's do our subtraction. 8 minus 1 gives you 7. And 1 minus 1 gives you 0, so you don't even really have to add that. Okay? So, since you don't have any other digits to bring down, and since you can't do this division, then you just say the remainder is 7. So the answer to this problem is going to be 21 with a remainder of 7. So 11 goes into 238 21 whole times with 7 left over. So you're going to have 7 guys left over there. And you could check it if you wanted to by saying 11 multiply by 21, okay, and then you add your 7 back into the answer, and you should get 238. Okay? So I'm just, basically working problems a little bit longer. Division really is challenging because it makes you use your multiplication, and that's what's really hard about it. But if you practice problems, which is what I'm doing with you here, I think you'll get the hang of it. Let's say 509 divided by 25. How would you do that? Well, first thing you're going to do is you're going to take 509, put it under the house, and you're going to put 25 outside the house. Okay? Now, can 25 be divided into 5? No, it can't because 5 is too small. You have to be dividing into a number bigger, okay? Can 25 be divided into 50? Sure it can. 25 times what would be 50? 25 times 2. 25 times 2 is going to be 50, and let me show you how. 25 times 2. 5 times 2 is 10, so I'm going to write 0 here and put the 1 up here. 2 times 2 gives me 4, plus 1 gives me 5. So 25 times 2 does give me 50, and that's why I put it over there, okay? So because I know that 25 times 2 does give me 50, I can subtract and just put a 0 here. 0 minus 0 gives me 0, 5 minus 5 gives me 0, so I've got a big fat 0. Can 25 be divided into 0? Of course it can't, okay? It's just too small, so you're going to have to take your 9 and drag it down here, okay? Can 25 be divided into 9? Because these leading zeros, they don't really mean anything. Okay, so the next thing you do is you say, can 25 be divided into 9? Okay? The answer is, how many times can 25 be divided into 9? Well, 25 can go 0 times into 9, okay? In the previous problems, when we've been working on this, I specifically chose this problem to show you something very important. In the previous problems that we've worked, anytime the number down here, you couldn't divide it into it, basically I said, oh, that's just your remainder, okay? But in all of those problems, you had all the digits filled out above here. In other words, anytime you're doing a division problem, you're going to have, wherever you start dividing, like in this case we chose 50 and we put the number here, you're going to have to keep dividing and fill up digits above all of the digits in your problem, okay? So in all those other problems, you had these digits already filled out, and so whatever you were left with was just going to be a remainder. In this problem, we did everything properly, and we had a 9 left over, and 25 goes into 9 0 times. That's what I meant before when I said that how many times can you divide it into it? And I said, no, of course you can. Well, what I'm telling you here is the same thing. How many times can it be divided? 0 times, okay? I have a placeholder here. I've got to fill it out in order to finish solving this problem, so I'm going to put a 0 up there, okay? I'm going to put a 0 up there. Now, when I take the 0 multiplied by the 25, I'm just going to get 0, because 0 times anything is 0. So now, just like anything else, I do my subtraction. 9 minus 0 is going to give me 9. Now, since all of the digits are filled out up here, up until the last column, now I ask myself, can 25 go into 9? Well, no, it can't. So I say it's a remainder of 9. So the answer here is going to be 20 with a remainder of 9. It's very important for you to understand why we did that. Basically, wherever you start dividing, you're going to start putting numbers. In every problem you do, you're going to have a number over wherever you start up until the last column. Okay, so when you get down to a point when you're asking yourself, can you divide in there, okay, if you've got a digit available, you're going to have to go ahead and populate it with a 0. If there's no digit available, like in the end here, when we got down to this last one, we had all the digits filled up. So then when we asked ourselves again, could we divide into 9? Well, there's nothing else to do. We've already put all the digits down that we need to. So then we just say our remainder is 9. Okay? This kind of stuff is just going to come with practice. You can't really explain it in words. You just have to work problems, and that's why I'm picking these problems to try to help you. Okay. These are going to be, I think, challenging problems. Let's say you have 407 divided by 37. So all you do is you take your 407, put it under the house, and you're dividing by your 37. Okay, not that bad. Can 37 go into 4? No, it can't. Okay. Can 37 go into 40? Sure it can. It can go one whole time. 1 times 37 gives me 37. Okay? Gives me 37. Now let's go ahead and do a subtraction here. In order to do the subtraction, I'm going to have to borrow, making this a 3, and I'll make that a 10. Okay? 10 minus 7 is just going to give me 3, and 3 minus 3 is going to give me 0, so I'm not going to have to write that down. Can 37 go into 3? Can 37 go into 3? Well, no, it can't. But before I put a 0 up here, before I do anything, I got to go ahead and drag down my next digits, and then go ahead and ask myself, can 37 go into 37? Answer is yes, of course it can, one time. 1 times 37 gives me 37. And then, of course, you know 37 minus 37 is just going to give you 0. So there's no remainder. So the answer is just 11 in this case. 37 can go into 407 11 times. Okay? Now we're going to do one final problem. It's going to look really, really complicated. It's probably the hardest problem we're going to work here, and I'm just going to give it to you so that you can get some practice working a bigger problem. 5,283 divided by 24. So how will we do that? Well, just like always, 5283 divided by 24. So, can 24 go into 5? No, it can't, because 5 is too small. Can 24 go into 52? How many times can it do that? Well, let's see. 24 times 1 is going to be 24. 24 times 2, let's see what that would equal. 2 times 4 gives me 8. And 2 times 2 gives me 4, 48. I know that 48 is pretty darn close to 52, and so I think that that's going to be the right answer, and it is the right answer. So what you do is you just put a 2 over this column, because I've divided by into 52, and we just said 2 times 24 is going to give me 48. Okay? So I do a subtraction. Now in order to do the subtraction, I'm going to have to borrow, because 2 is too small on the top, so I'm going to put a 1 here. I'm going to make this a 4. Okay? So 12 minus 8 is going to give you 4. You can do that on your fingers. 12 minus 8 is going to give you 4. 4 minus 4 is going to give you 0, so I don't have to write it down there. Okay? Now, can 24 go into 4? No, it can't. But before I do anything else, I've got to try to drag down that next digit. Before you put any zeros up here, if you're trying to divide through, you've got to make sure and try to drag down that next digit over before you do that. Okay? So the question is, can 24 go into 48? Sure it can. We already just figured out that if it can go 2 times. 2 times 24 is 48. We just figured that out. Okay? So then we just subtract those two. 48 minus 48 obviously is going to give you 0. Can 24 go into 0? No, it can't. But before we put anything up here, we're going to have to drag our 3 down. Okay? We're going to have to drag our 3 down. Now that we have dragged our 3 down, we can ask ourselves, does 24 go into 3? Does 24 go into 3? No, it doesn't. But because I've got to put something here, because notice I started here with the 2 and I did here, I've got one more digit. In order for this problem to be complete, I've got to put something here, okay? And because I've already dragged down that next digit, 24 goes into 3 how many times? It goes 0 times because it's too small. You can't even divide it, not even 1 time. So you just put a 0 here, just like in the other problem. 0 times 24 is going to give you 0, okay? And then 3 minus 0, as you know, is just going to give you 3. So that just means you have a remainder of 3 because there's no more digits to put up here. 24 can't be divided into 3, and there's nothing else to write. I've got all of my digits up here above all the columns here. So the answer is 220 with a remainder of 3. So in these problems, the most important thing to do is start and be careful about it. You take your number that you're dividing by, and you just look and see and kind of go look at the first digit and then the first 2 digits and so on, and see if you can divide in. If you can, go ahead and put your number, do your multiplication and subtract, and then just keep doing that, dragging down digits as you need, and keep dividing, dividing, dividing. Eventually, you'll get to a point where you can't divide anymore, and you've got all these digits up on the top. And then you have your answer and you have your remainder, and that is how you do long division.